Karoline Leavitt isn't just holding her ground, she's putting them on the defensive. The same voices that once scoffed at her on national television are now huddling in private meetings, murmuring about damage control and scrambling for legal loopholes. They assumed they could bury this with a few dismissive headlines, a casual wave of the hand. They were wrong. What started as a minor legal dispute they barely acknowledged has spiraled into a full-blown crisis far beyond what they ever imagined. ABC is in full damage control. The once untouchable hosts of The View are suddenly watching their backs, and even their most loyal audience members can sense that something is deeply, deeply off. So what changed? Why are Whoopi, Joy, and the rest of the panel shifting uneasily in their seats? What really went down behind the scenes to turn their smug certainty into quiet panic? But now, the biggest question looms. Is it too late for them to save themselves? This isn't just about Karoline Leavitt anymore. This lawsuit has transformed from a minor inconvenience into a full-scale reckoning, one that could shake The View to its core. And yet, in the beginning, they acted as if they were invincible. The hosts didn't just brush off the lawsuit, they mocked it. They smirked, they scoffed, they turned Karoline into the butt of their scripted monologues. To them, she was just another conservative name to dismiss with an eye roll and a few snide remarks. Joy Behar, dripping with her usual cynicism, made her feelings clear. "Oh, please," she sneered, waving a hand like she was swatting away a bad joke. Another conservative playing the victim. How original. Whoopi Goldberg took it even further, chuckling as she reassured the audience that this was nothing but a desperate stunt. "Come on, we've had worse thrown at us. This'll be old news by next week." And then there was Sunny Hostin, the show's self-proclaimed legal expert, radiating the confidence of someone convinced their credentials made them untouchable. She spoke with certainty, her smirk unwavering. "This is nothing. Legally speaking, she has no case," she declared. "It won't even make it to court." For a brief moment, it looked like their usual playbook was working. The media, ever loyal to The View's brand of commentary, quickly fell in line. CNN ran a segment brushing off the lawsuit as a flimsy attempt to silence free speech. Over on MSNBC, legal analysts confidently echoed the same talking points, claiming the lawsuit had no real foundation and wouldn't survive in court. The message was clear: Karoline Leavitt didn't stand a chance, and for a fleeting moment, they believed it. They assumed, just as they had so many times before, that their media allies, their collective influence, and their sheer arrogance would be enough to kill the story before it gained momentum. But they made one critical mistake. Karoline Leavitt wasn't backing down, and neither was her lawsuit. For weeks, The View's hosts had laughed it off, treating the case as nothing more than political theater. And for a while, the media's unwavering support kept the illusion alive that there was nothing to worry about. But inside ABC's headquarters, it was a different story. The jokes and smug one-liners might have played well on TV, but behind the scenes, panic had set in. Unlike the hosts, ABC's legal team had actually read the lawsuit. They pored over every allegation, every piece of evidence, every legal argument, and what they found. It wasn't just concerning, it was a disaster waiting to unfold. This wasn't some empty threat, a lawsuit built on flimsy claims or speculation. This was a ticking time bomb. The case wasn't just well-structured, it was airtight. That $800 million in damages wasn't just a random figure Karoline Leavitt had thrown out. The lawsuit was backed by concrete evidence, sworn testimony, and a rock-solid argument for defamation, workplace misconduct, and calculated malice. And if this ever made it to trial, the consequences wouldn't just be a few negative headlines. It would tear open the inner workings of ABC for the entire world to see. The network's executives knew exactly what that meant. Internal emails, confidential correspondences, behind-the-scenes production notes. Everything they had fought to keep hidden could now be laid bare. Every detail scrutinized, every decision dissected, exposed in ways that could shake ABC to its core. Suddenly, this wasn't just about The View. This was about everything ABC had spent years protecting. And for the first time, they weren't the ones controlling the narrative. Behind closed doors, panic set in. Emergency meetings were called. Lawyers, PR specialists, and top executives huddled in full crisis mode, scrambling for a way to contain the damage before it spun completely out of control. Some were ready to go on the offensive, believing their influence and vast resources could still crush Karoline before she gained too much momentum. But others, the more level-headed voices in the room, understood the reality. This situation had already spiraled beyond their control. If it went to trial, they weren't just dealing with a lawsuit, they were facing a reckoning. And it was a reckoning they were utterly unprepared to handle. For the first time, the network's top executives, the ones who had always assumed their power made them untouchable, found themselves grappling with a question they never thought they'd have to ask. How do we shut this down before it takes us down? The walls of ABC weren't just closing in. They were beginning to crack under the immense pressure. The once unified leadership was now divided into two opposing factions, each convinced they had the only viable solution. One side, the aggressive legal strategists, the corporate enforcers, who had built their reputations on silencing lawsuits before they ever saw the light of day, refused to back down. Their plan? Fight fire with fire. Overwhelm Leavitt with endless legal motions. Drag out the case indefinitely until she either gave up or ran out of resources. To them, this wasn't just about one lawsuit. It was about maintaining dominance, a test of power. And they weren't about to let one determined woman set a precedent that could shatter the network's long-standing ability to dodge real accountability. But the other side, the ones who truly understood how fragile a media empire could be, weren't. So reckless. The PR veterans, the corporate strategists, and the seasoned executives who had spent decades mastering the art of damage control saw the danger for what it was. This wasn't just another scandal to be managed. It was a ticking time bomb, and they had no interest in waiting around to see how much destruction it could cause. If this goes to trial, one executive reportedly warned in a closed-door meeting, we don't just lose money, we lose control. And that was the real nightmare. Not just the financial damage, not just the humiliation of a courtroom defeat, but the exposure, the undeniable evidence that would be laid bare for the world to see. A trial wouldn't just cost them dollars. It would cost them credibility. ABC's top brass had spent years crafting an impenetrable public image, carefully building a fortress of influence that made them nearly untouchable. If Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit saw the inside of a courtroom, that fortress wouldn't just crack, it would collapse. And so the internal battle raged on. One side demanded war, the other sought surrender, but on their own terms. They needed an exit strategy, one that would make the lawsuit disappear, without making them look like they were running scared. Meanwhile, as this high-stakes battle played out behind closed doors, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin remained completely, blissfully unaware. On air, they carried on as if nothing had changed. The jokes continued. Whoopi, always, eager for a dramatic dismissal, waved off the lawsuit with an exaggerated sigh. Joy, always the cynic, tossed out another one-liner at Karoline's expense. Sunny, still reveling in her role as the group's self-proclaimed legal expert, smirked and reassured their audience that there was absolutely nothing to worry about. To them, this was still just a game, a segment, a fleeting headline that would soon fade like all the others. What they didn't realize was that behind the scenes, the network was already in full-blown crisis mode, scrambling to clean up the mess they had created. And by the time the hosts finally understood the severity of the situation, by the time someone sat them down and told them the truth, it was already too late. The second word spread that ABC was considering a deal with Karoline Leavitt, everything changed. Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar weren't just irritated, they were livid. They had spent weeks treating the lawsuit as a joke, mocking Karoline as just another desperate right-winger chasing attention. And now, the very network that had shielded them for years was negotiating behind their backs. The moment Whoopi found out, she exploded. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped, her voice sharp, her expression contorted with disbelief. "We're actually taking her seriously now?" Her outrage wasn't just about the lawsuit. It was about ABC itself. For years, Whoopi had been untouchable. Scandals? She brushed them off. Backlash? It never stuck. No matter how much controversy she stirred, the network had always protected her. But now ABC was seriously considering giving Karoline exactly what she wanted. Joy Behar wasn't handling this any better. She stormed backstage, shoving open the dressing room door with enough force to make it rattle. The moment she reached the vanity, her makeup case slammed onto the table with a loud thud. "We're not giving her a single damn cent," she snapped, her voice slicing through the room like a blade. Her anger wasn't just about the lawsuit. It was about the insult of it all. She and Whoopi had built this show. They were the reason. People tuned in. The ones who turned The View into a powerhouse, making the network a fortune. And now, ABC was ready to fold. Over this? Over her? The very thought of it made her stomach turn. Across the hall, Sunny Hostin's usual composed demeanor was nowhere to be found. On air, she had played her role perfectly. Calm, dismissive, unwavering in her confidence that the case was baseless. But now reality was hitting fast and hard. She had seen the court filings, skimmed through the evidence Karoline Leavitt's team was preparing to present, and it was worse than she had let on. Much worse. The legal team had already issued a stark warning. If this lawsuit went to trial, it wouldn't just be about a few reckless remarks on air. It would crack open the entire operation. Internal emails, private discussions, production notes that were never meant to see the light of day. Every conversation, every offhand comment, every decision made behind closed doors, exposed for the world to see. This wasn't just about losing a case. It was about losing control of the narrative. And for the first time since this firestorm began, Whoopi and Joy weren't laughing. They weren't rolling their eyes. They were pacing, calling in favors, scrambling for a way out. Whoopi didn't waste a second. She grabbed her phone and started dialing. There was no way in hell she was going to let Karoline Leavitt take them down. And what she did next, that changed everything. The shift was impossible to ignore. For weeks, The View had mocked, dismissed, and ridiculed Karoline's lawsuit. But now they were practically begging her to stop. It happened suddenly. A shift in tone, a change in posture. One morning, as the lawsuit came up in discussion, Whoopi, Joy, and Sunny weren't their usual selves. The smug confidence was gone. Instead, there was hesitation, uncertainty in their voices. Whoopi sighed, shaking her head, as if weighed down by something too heavy to bear. "Look, I think we all need to take a step back," she muttered, her voice suddenly softer. "There's been a lot of unnecessary hostility, and frankly, this isn't good for anyone." Joy, the same woman who had been firing off jabs at Karoline just weeks ago, had miraculously found a new perspective. "I don't know why this has to go so far," she mused, her voice strained, like she was trying to sound reasonable. "I mean, can't we just sit down and work this out like adults?" And then there was Sunny, the legal expert, the one who should have seen this coming from the start. She leaned forward, carefully choosing her words. "Karoline, if you're watching, I think there's a way we can resolve this without dragging it through the courts." A plea. Not a legal argument, not a witty retort, a plea. The same women who had spent weeks trashing Karoline Leavitt on air were now desperately trying to reason with her. But here's the thing. This wasn't about making peace. This was about saving themselves. Behind the cameras, ABC's legal team had made one thing painfully clear. This lawsuit wasn't just a nuisance. It was an existential threat. If Karoline refused to back down, The View could be forced to hand over sensitive documents, private emails, behind-the-scenes footage. And if that happened, it wouldn't just be the hosts at risk. It would be the entire show. This sudden public plea, it was their last-ditch effort to escape disaster. But there was just one problem. Karoline Leavitt wasn't buying it, and the moment she made her response public, it was game over. The fallout was instant. As soon as The View's desperate shift in tone hit the airwaves, the internet erupted. Social media exploded, and nobody was fooled. Viewers saw the change for what it really was, a panicked attempt to rewrite history. For weeks, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin had dismissed Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit as inconsequential, treating it with open mockery. Now, their tone had shifted dramatically, with a noticeable attempt to de-escalate the situation. However, the sudden change did not go unnoticed by the public. Social media erupted with skepticism. So now they want to have a conversation? After weeks of ridicule, it's too late. The View assumed they were untouchable. Now they're in damage control mode. Joy Behar looks visibly shaken. They know this lawsuit is a serious threat. Even Sunny Hostin, a former prosecutor who had initially dismissed the case as meritless, now appeared far less confident. Her previous assurances that the lawsuit held no weight stood in stark contrast to the clear concern now visible on her face. The apparent contradiction did not go unnoticed, and the shift in rhetoric failed to convince both critics and longtime viewers. Meanwhile, conservative media outlets seized on the moment. The View's apparent retreat became a major talking point across platforms. Fox News aired a segment titled, "The View is Panicking. Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit has them begging for mercy," analyzing the host's sudden change in tone. The footage, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin now striking a far more conciliatory stance, played repeatedly, reinforcing the perception that the lawsuit was far more serious than they had initially let on. Public reaction was swift and unforgiving. The Daily Wire ran a headline reading, "Watch Whoopi and Joy try to save themselves. Too late." As the scrutiny intensified, it became increasingly clear. The lawsuit was no longer a topic of mockery. It was now a crisis the show could no longer afford to ignore. News outlets and social media users wasted no time dissecting The View's sudden shift in tone. Clips juxtaposed the host's earlier dismissive remarks with their newfound restraint, accompanied by captions that left little room for misinterpretation. Ridicule on Monday, damage control on Friday. But it wasn't just mainstream media amplifying the moment. Independent creators, YouTubers, podcasters, and political commentators joined the conversation. Some meticulously broke down the hypocrisy, analyzing every forced smile and measured response. Others let the clips speak for themselves, allowing The View's own contradictions to tell the story. The consensus was unanimous. They mocked, they dismissed. Now they were scrambling, and no one, absolutely no one, was convinced. The internet had a field day. The memes were unrelenting, and the public reaction was swift. One image circulated faster than The View could attempt damage. Control, Whoopi, when she realized Karoline isn't backing down. Beneath it, a photo of Whoopi Goldberg looking visibly unsettled, as if she had just come to terms with the gravity of the situation. Joy Behar wasn't spared either. Another viral clip made the rounds. Joy Behar trying to pretend she didn't mock Karoline last week. It was seamlessly edited alongside footage of someone awkwardly attempting to backtrack, an unmistakable illustration of the host's sudden shift in demeanor. The backlash was immediate, and as the story continued to gain traction, it was becoming increasingly clear. The View's attempt at damage control had only made things worse, and it wasn't just conservative media amplifying the backlash anymore. Even The View's own audience saw through the sudden shift. Their official YouTube channel, Twitter, and Facebook were inundated with comments. "Wow, this is pathetic. If you weren't guilty, you wouldn't be begging. First you mocked her. Now you want to talk? Nope. Karoline has all the power now. The View just exposed themselves." There was no salvaging it. The entire narrative had flipped. What started as The View ridiculing and dismissing Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit had escalated into a full-blown crisis for the show. And the worst part? Karoline wasn't finished. If The View thought they could simply reframe the situation, conservative media was determined to ensure that wasn't an option. The moment Whoopi, Joy, and Sunny shifted from arrogance to appeasement, right-wing outlets went into overdrive, dissecting every aspect of their hypocrisy. Fox News wasted no time. Entire segments were dedicated to The View's stunning reversal, contrasting clips of the hosts laughing off the lawsuit with their sudden, almost pleading tone on air. Just weeks ago, these same women had openly mocked, dismissed, and belittled Karoline. Now they were practically groveling, live on national television. Tucker Carlson was quick to call them out, airing a clip of Whoopi and Joy mocking the lawsuit before cutting to their weak attempt at damage control. His criticism was blunt. "This is what happens when you ignore a lawsuit until it's too late." They laughed at it. Now they're begging on national TV. First, they ridiculed it. Then, they dismissed it. Now, they were panicking. But Fox News wasn't the only one tearing into them. The Daily Wire delivered the harshest blow with a scathing headline, "The View's fake apology. Whoopi and Joy are terrified of Karoline Leavitt's lawsuit." Ben Shapiro didn't hold back either. On his show, he systematically broke down The View's desperate backpedaling, calling it one of the most humiliating media reversals in recent history. He let the clips speak for themselves. Side-by-side footage of Whoopi and Joy sneering at the lawsuit, followed by their sudden plea for discussion. His response? Now they want a conversation? Where was this energy when they were smearing Karoline on live TV? The only reason they're begging is because they know they're about to lose. Candace Owens took it even further. She wasn't just mocking them, she was dismantling them. One of the most transparent, desperate attempts at saving face in television history, she declared, and she wasn't done. Whoopi and Joy had built their brand on being champions of strong women. Now, they were pleading with the very woman they had tried to destroy. They thought Karoline was an easy target. They assumed they could take her down without consequences. Now, they were scrambling. This is what happens when you push the wrong person. But the biggest embarrassment? Sunny Hostin. As a former prosecutor, she should have known better. She, more than anyone, should have recognized the legal weight of this case. Yet instead of taking it seriously, she stood by as Whoopi and Joy openly mocked and dismissed Karoline. Now, her entire stance had collapsed. Reports had already surfaced. Behind the scenes, Sunny was urging Whoopi and Joy to soften their tone, fully aware of how bad this was about to get. Even CNN attempted to step in and spin the situation, but their narrative wasn't landing. Their attempts to frame the lawsuit as a politically motivated stunt only backfired. Viewers weren't buying it, and independent media was relentless. YouTube commentators, political analysts, everyone was dissecting The View's desperate attempt at damage control. Whoopi and Joy wanted to play tough, until they realized Karoline actually had a case. Joy Behar's expression while reading that teleprompter said it all. She knew they had miscalculated. And Sunny? A former prosecutor trying to spin the situation at the last minute? Too late. By the end of the night, the internet was flooded with clips exposing The View's hypocrisy. One viral edit was particularly brutal. A seamless cut between Joy Behar laughing at the lawsuit on air, then looking visibly uncomfortable as she attempted to walk it back. The contrast was humiliating. And the memes? They weren't slowing down anytime soon. One of the harshest comparisons? This is The View's Bud Light moment, a direct nod to a brand collapse after alienating its audience. Another? Whoopi Goldberg is learning the hard way what happens when you mess with the wrong conservative. And the best one? Joy Behar just had her CNN Plus moment. Total disaster. But the worst part? Karoline didn't even have to say a word. She let The View's downfall unfold on its own. The more they tried to fix the mess, the worse it got. Their Sudden shift to common ground only fueled the backlash. The same hosts who mocked and dismissed Karoline were now pleading for reason, and no one was buying it. The damage? Irreversible. At ABC headquarters? Panic. This wasn't just another bad news cycle. It was a full-blown crisis. Scandals came and went. But this was a legal war zone. ABC wasn't just facing bad press. They were staring down a lawsuit that could expose everything, and that was the real nightmare. ABC's first instinct was damage control. They assumed ignoring the controversy would make it disappear. But instead of fading, the backlash kept growing. Demands for accountability intensified. More outlets picked up the story, and commentators repeatedly exposed the View's hypocrisy, playing their past remarks on an endless loop. Behind the scenes, ABC's internal reports revealed an even harsher reality. This wasn't just negative press, it was a financial nightmare. The View's ratings had already been declining, but now they were plummeting. Viewers were tuning out, advertisers were growing wary, and executives were in full-blown panic mode. As their once loyal audience turned against them, they were stuck. Apologizing wouldn't solve anything with the lawsuit looming, and pushing back would only make matters worse. Every attempt at damage control fueled more backlash. With no viable solution, ABC resorted to its usual crisis strategy: bury the white problem. But at this point, they were out of moves. Ignoring it failed. Hoping the outrage would pass didn't work. Counting on Karoline Leavitt to back down was a mistake. She stood her ground. Now, ABC had one last desperate option: throw money at the problem and try to settle it behind closed doors. High-level executives, lawyers, and crisis strategists discreetly approached Karoline's legal team, hoping a massive settlement would put an end to the ordeal. The offer? Millions. Not just a standard payout, but a staggering sum meant to silence her permanently. But there was a catch. To accept the money, Karoline wouldn't just have to drop the lawsuit, she'd have to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement, effectively erasing the scandal from public record. ABC was betting on the idea that, in the end, everyone has a price, but they miscalculated. Karoline wasn't here to negotiate, settle, or let them sweep this under the rug. She had made her mission clear. This wasn't about money. It was about exposing everything they wanted hidden. Her outright refusal sent shockwaves through ABC. They had expected counteroffers and drawn-out negotiations, not immediate rejection. And now, they were in full crisis mode. If buying her off wasn't an option, their only move was to control the narrative. Scrambling to appear proactive, ABC's PR team went into overdrive, crafting a statement they hoped would calm the backlash. The result? A carefully worded corporate cliché. At ABC, we take all concerns seriously and remain committed to fostering a respectful and inclusive workplace. We are reviewing recent developments and continue to engage in productive dialogue with all parties involved. It was exactly what you'd expect: an assortment of vague, hollow buzzwords strung together with no real substance. The objective wasn't to address the controversy, but to talk in circles long enough to divert attention from it. But the strategy backfired spectacularly. No one, not the media, not the public, not even their usual supporters, was convinced. The backlash was immediate. Fox News wasted no time dissecting the statement, with a headline that summed it all up in one line: ABC scrambles to contain the View lawsuit, now they're begging. The Daily Wire was even more scathing. This PR statement proves one thing: ABC is terrified. And Breitbart put it in the bluntest terms: this isn't damage control, this is panic. But it wasn't just conservative media calling them out. Longtime viewers, many who had stood by the View for years, weren't convinced either. Social media erupted with skepticism. If they had nothing to hide, why the desperate response? What exactly are they reviewing? We all saw what happened live on air. This statement says a lot while saying nothing at all. ABC had counted on their corporate PR strategy to diffuse the situation. Instead, it only fanned the flames. And with the public refusing to buy into their empty rhetoric, the network resorted to Plan C, their most predictable move yet. They turned to their media allies, scrambling to shift the narrative. ABC executives reached out to their most trusted defenders: CNN, MSNBC, and The Washington Post. Each outlet was given a clear directive: reshape the story, make Karoline the villain, recast The View as the real victim. CNN swiftly ran a segment framing Karoline's lawsuit as a politically motivated attack on progressive voices. MSNBC took a different approach, portraying the lawsuit as nothing more than a calculated attempt to stir controversy and divide audiences. Then there was The Washington Post, which went all in, publishing an op-ed that framed The View as the unfair target of conservative activists. ABC had played this game before, leveraging sympathetic media to spin their scandal as a partisan smear campaign. But this time, there was a major flaw in their strategy. The evidence was undeniable. The footage existed. The proof was everywhere. This wasn't about selective outrage or conservative media distorting the truth. Viewers had seen it all unfold in real time. Whoopi, Joy, and Sunny openly mocking Karoline on live television. They had watched them scoff at her lawsuit, roll their eyes, and deliver condescending remarks meant to undermine her. And now, those same women were practically pleading for the case to go away. No carefully crafted op-eds, no talk show segments, and no sympathetic news coverage could erase what millions had already witnessed firsthand. The audience wasn't buying the spin, not for a second. Social media dismantled ABC's narrative with ease, leaving behind a trail of sharp, unforgiving criticism. The View mocked Karoline for weeks. Now, they're desperate for her to back down. Poetic justice. Whoopi and Joy were so confident before. Look, at them now. ABC wants to paint Karoline as the villain, but they're the ones facing a lawsuit. Pathetic. It was relentless. Every attempt to control the narrative, every carefully worded PR statement, every desperate effort to shift public perception met with ridicule, skepticism, and an even greater wave of outrage. And that's when things truly began to unravel. ABC, now fully grasping the scale of the disaster unfolding, made one last, desperate attempt to distance itself from The View. For years, the network had stood by the show. No matter the controversy, the hosts had been given free rein, pushing boundaries, provoking debate, and stirring outrage, all without consequence. But now, The View wasn't just stirring controversy. It had become a liability. Executives were livid. Behind closed doors, murmurs of the unthinkable began to spread. ABC was actively considering whether The View was still worth keeping on the air. For the first time in years, the question wasn't how to fix the damage. It was whether the show should exist at all. And those conversations, they weren't just speculation. A high-level insider at ABC put it bluntly, this show is becoming more trouble than it's worth. The backlash, the lawsuits, the negative press, it's nonstop. The execs are weighing their options. Inside The View, panic set in, the kind that had no simple solution. Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and Sunny Hostin never imagined it would escalate to this level. They had assumed Karoline was just another conservative guest, a fleeting controversy they could mock, dismiss, and move past. Instead, she had completely flipped the script. ABC believed they were in control, that Karoline would take the criticism and fade away. But she had done the opposite, turning their own arrogance against them, cornering them in a situation they could no longer escape from. And now there was no easy way out. Everyone inside ABC knew it. If the network or The View had expected Karoline Leavitt to fold under pressure, they were about to be proven disastrously wrong. The moment word spread that The View had shifted from ridicule to desperation, the entire country took notice. This wasn't just another fleeting media controversy or high-profile lawsuit. It had evolved into an all-out battle between a powerful television network and a young conservative force who refused to be silenced. And the question on everyone's mind, would Karoline take the deal? Would she negotiate? Would she finally let it go? She made them wait. 24 hours, no statements, no press conferences, no cryptic social media posts, nothing. And that silence, it sent The View into full-scale meltdown mode. Behind the scenes, the panic was uncontrollable. Whoopi Goldberg was livid, demanding answers from their legal team. How had they failed to predict Karoline's next move? She wanted to regain control of the narrative, but without a response from Karoline, there was nothing to push back against. Joy Behar, after years of saying whatever she pleased without consequence, was unraveling. For once, she was the one in the hot seat, and she despised it. She fumed to producers, outraged that Karoline had the audacity to take things this far. But Sunny Hostin, she saw it for what it was. This wasn't desperation. Karoline wasn't reacting emotionally or scrambling for an exit. She was in complete control. And then, just as ABC reached its breaking point, Karoline finally ended the silence. But instead of engaging in a drawn-out media spectacle, she did something far more devastating. She dropped a single statement. No fiery speech, no back-and-forth rebuttals, no press tour. Just one post. I'm not backing down. The truth matters. See you in court. 5 words. And they hit ABC like a wrecking ball. Because those 5 words meant only one thing. Karoline wasn't negotiating. She wasn't playing by their rules. She wasn't looking for a settlement. She was taking this all the way. And the internet erupted. She's not backing down. Whoopi and Joy are finished. They mocked her, tried to intimidate her, and now they're begging. Unbelievable. Karoline Leavitt is about to expose everything. ABC should be terrified. Within hours, her response was everywhere. Fox News ran a segment breaking down every word. One of the most shocking media reversals in history. The Daily Wire's take, ABC's nightmare is just beginning. Karoline is taking this fight to the finish line. Inside ABC, chaos had turned into full-blown desperation. Executives had been certain Karoline would cave. They expected her to negotiate, settle, or quietly walk away. Instead, she did the exact opposite. She shut them down entirely. No drawn-out disputes, no back-and-forth negotiations. Just a firm, undeniable statement. She wasn't letting them off the hook. And inside the View's offices, the panic reached an all-time high. This was no longer just another television controversy. It wasn't a PR issue that could be managed with damage control. This was real. The lawsuit was moving forward. The media was fully engaged. And nothing, not corporate statements, media spin, or behind-the-scenes deals, could prevent ABC's worst fear from becoming reality. Karoline Leavitt exposing everything in court. At this point, it wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about a single lawsuit. It had escalated into something far bigger. A direct challenge to the unchecked power of The View and its network. For ABC, The View, and their team of high-powered attorneys, this was a nightmare scenario. They had thrown everything at her. They mocked her. They dismissed her lawsuit as frivolous. They tried to undermine her credibility, but none of it worked, and now they had run out of options. At ABC headquarters, the sense of urgency was overwhelming. Executives were locked in crisis meetings, scrambling to contain the damage. Some were furious, blaming the hosts for letting the situation spiral out of control. Others were desperately searching for a way to make the lawsuit disappear before it dragged the entire network down with it. But it was too late. For years, The View had operated without accountability. They had mocked, belittled, and smeared conservative guests, politicians, even their own viewers, without consequence. And for years, they had gotten away with it. Until now, for the first time ever, they were the ones under fire. And the most humiliating part? The very woman they had tried to discredit was now threatening to expose them. On the biggest stage possible, a courtroom, ABC's legal team was in complete disarray. Executives were frantically urging the hosts to stay quiet, to stop making matters worse, and to avoid fueling the controversy any further. They had already seen the fallout when Whoopi and Joy spoke out, turning a PR nightmare into a full-blown crisis. Now, every single word they uttered was under scrutiny. Their casual remarks, their dismissive attitude, their outright mockery. This wasn't just bad publicity anymore. It was evidence. And according to insiders, this lawsuit had grown beyond Karoline. Other voices were starting to emerge. Former guests, contributors, staff members, people who had been silenced, ignored, or mistreated. Rumors of behind-the-scenes misconduct, hypocrisy, and a toxic culture were beginning to surface. And if this case went to trial, what else would be uncovered? What long-buried scandals had ABC kept hidden? How far would The View's hosts go to protect themselves? The media held its breath. Legal teams scrambled. And Karoline? She wasn't even entertaining their offers to settle. She had bigger plans. This wasn't just about one show. She was challenging the entire system that had shielded The View for years. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a reckoning. And The View? They weren't ready for what was coming next.